Greetings and welcome. My name is Ryan O'Rourke from Stay Creative Painting. I truly hope you enjoy today's 10-minute painting. This new series essentially illustrates my attempts at creating a painting in a very short period of time. Sometimes I succeed, sometimes I do not, but that's what keeps it interesting and fun, so stick around and enjoy the tips and tricks. Of course, if you have any questions or inquiries regarding today's lesson, please leave me a comment in the comment section down below. I'm always here and happy to help. Speaking of help, if you'd like assistance with the drawing process, I do offer the traceable along with the extended version of this 10-minute painting lesson up over on Patreon, where you can find a back catalog of over 50 exclusive hour-long lessons and their traceables as well. Up over on Patreon, we also have a private Facebook group where we all kind of share our work, help each other out. It's a great place for artists to kind of keep each other engaged and make sure that we're consistently creating together. It's also a great way to share your work with me. On top of that, over at the Alpine level of Patreon, I've also just added all 5 of my ebooks, including Acrylics for Beginners, which essentially is the essential, is everything you need to know about acrylic painting before you jump into your first acrylic painting. In it, we talk about how to blend our colors, about color theory, about creating great compositions, rendering 3-dimensional subjects, which brushes to use, really everything you need to know. And it's also offered individually over on my Etsy. Speaking of ebooks, again, for those of you who don't love the drawing process, I do have 3 ebooks full of traceables over on Patreon and Etsy. So if you're interested in any of that, go check it out. It is full of great resources, and I'm sure it'll help you just really speed up that process of getting to be a better painter. With that said, I would like to note that again, I am here and happy to help. So if you have any questions, again, let me know. Now let's jump into today's 10-minute painting lesson. I would like to quickly mention our palette. And here I have a sap green, a primary blue, titanium white, and Mars black. We're only using 4 pigments here, so it's quite simple and should be great and easy for beginners. With that, let's create a great painting and have some fun. I'd like to begin here today by taking my larger flat-headed brush, making sure the tip is nice and damp. Then I'm going to head over to my palette, grab a good amount of primary blue, a hint of titanium white, and about half that of Mars black. And I'm going to mix up this slightly desaturated blue, which will be great for our base layer. It isn't too bright, it isn't too dark, and it'll be fantastic to build on top of with both brighter and darker pigments. Then, as I move towards the edges, I'll add a little bit more Mars black to our mixture, and you can see just how quickly that got dark. Mars black is an incredibly strong pigment, and you generally don't need that much of it to cover a large space or to make part of your image darker. So here, now I'm just going over to my other side, and you can tell that I'm not scraping the paint off as far as I can. I go back to my palette if I feel like I don't have enough, and then I come back in and I work that into our painting. I'm softly going over that brighter area, but not so much so that I bring the darker pigments into it. Now I'm going to switch over to my medium-sized round-headed brush. I'll take some titanium white, mix that into our previous mixture, a little bit of primary blue. Now we have a nice bright blue. And I'll apply that right where I want my moon to be. I'll take off my excess paint on my cloth, and I'll just blend that out with little taps on all sides. I'm using the smaller round-headed brush because it's going to create these very soft impressions, and we're not going to get a lot of hard brush strokes. There we go. We can do a little bit more. And just build it out slowly. Trying to keep it fairly centered. I think that's a great start there. You can see the farther I drag it, the more it dissipates, and the softer it gets. You get more of that nice ethereal glow through that process. I'll switch to my smaller round-headed brush now. Grab some titanium white, a hint of blue, and I'll just create a really small, subtle moon right here. You can see I'm not getting a pure titanium white because it's mixing with the blue on the palette and the blue on the canvas as well. And that's good, it'll give it a little bit of depth. Now, let's move into our waterfall. For that, I'll go back to my larger flat-headed brush. I'll get some of this primary blue. I want it to be fairly saturated, so I'm not going to use as much of a mixture of titanium white and Mars black. And I'm going to start at the tops of my waterfall by creating a nice sharp edge with a stroke, just like that. And then I'm going to start dragging that pigment downwards. There we go. And you can see that I'm getting lots of different blues, some with titanium white, some that are a little bit darker, some that are more of a pure primary blue, and that's just because I didn't mix my pigment that well on my palette. But it's actually quite neat in this scenario because it gives us lots of variation and makes it look nice and natural. So we're starting with a highlight on the top of our waterfall because we want to build some depth. And when you want to build depth on a subject, you generally start by applying light to the side of the subject that is facing the light or closest to it. And then as you get farther away, you start to make it a little bit darker. So here I have a bit of primary blue and Mars black, and I'll apply that down right below it, as you can see. And we have a hard line between the highlight and the midtone right now, but that's okay. We will go back and soften all of it. There we go. Now I'm going to go from the bottom and just drag my way upwards. You can see it's blending the middle tone into the lighter tone at the top. And every time I come back down, I'm bringing a little bit of that light pigment to the bottom, but that's okay. It'll be easy to go back and cover up. Get some more primary blue, a little bit more Mars black. Mix that on our palette there. Go down to the bottom. Fix all of those little bright areas. And as I bring my brush up, I start with a lot of pressure to apply a lot of paint, and then as I get up to the top, I relieve pressure, and that gives me a softer application and more of a subtle blend. So that's a good first layer for our waterfall. The light's coming from behind, it's illuminating the top as we get to the middle area, we're getting farther away from the light, and then the bottom area is quite far. Now we will be coming back to this, but I want it to dry a little bit before I do because I want to add more highlight and I don't want it to get diluted by the darker pigments. In the meantime, I'll take my medium-sized flat-headed brush, get some more medium-valued blue, so not too dark, not too light, right in the middle, kind of like what we had in our sky, and I'll create this little, I suppose big, river that's coming out from the base of the waterfall. Now in reality this would probably be a bit bigger because the waterfall is so large, but I'm going to take some artistic liberties for the sake of the aesthetic of the painting, making it look as pretty as we possibly can make it. So there we go, just a very simple base layer. Then I'll switch over to my smallest flat-headed brush, get a little bit of a titanium white in that blue there. I'll find the center of the moon and then I'll come down and just with these little taps back and forth, I'll create this highlight in the middle, as you can see. And I drag it off to the left and right hand side, allowing it to dissipate and blend into the rest of the blue. This will give it a really nice transition, make it feel really natural. And go back and add highlights a good number of times. If you find it's not getting much brighter and it's just getting gray, it's just because you have a little bit too much Mars black in that mixture. Don't worry though, just let it dry completely and then come back over it with this lighter layer and a little bit of water and you'll be able to get the same effect, but with a bit of a brighter application. There we go. Again, nice and subtle. Now I'm going to switch to my older flat-headed brush, grab some of our Sapa green here, and I'll tap that right down here on the bottom of our waterfall, as you can see. And I'm using this older brush because there's so many little bristles that stand out in varying directions, so when I make a tap with it, I get all these different applications. You can make one of these very simply by just peeling back the bristles of a regular flat-headed brush until it looks distressed. You generally don't want it to be wet in the painting process though, like most of our other brushes, because the bristles will condense and you won't get all of these nice little implications. But through this, we just create all of these little trees so quickly. Great for just getting started, getting some paint down on the canvas and creating something nice and detailed. Speaking of detailed, I'm going to apply a bit more of the pigment in the foreground, because in the foreground generally you see more detail, and in the background it's more implications. So I'm trying to create slightly larger applications here. I'm not covering the entirety of the area, I still want the black showing through a little bit. That way we have some contrast and it looks like the light's hitting the tops of these trees and revealing that beautiful green, and then in the shadows it's darker. I might also blend a little bit of the background greens. That way, again, they don't look as detailed as the ones in the foreground. You can also take a hint of titanium white to brighten up a little bit of them as well, and just throw that on there. Now it looks like it has some really nice moonlight coming down. Just like that. Now I'm going to switch back to the larger flat-headed brush. Make sure it's nice and damp. I'll get some of my titanium white, primary blue, makes up a really bright, nice blue. This one doesn't have any Mars black in it. I'm going to go back up to the tops. I'm going to apply it predominantly to the top to begin with. As you can see, it's much brighter than what we had before. And I'm just going to drag it down. I'm going to be very soft as I do. I release pressure as I get towards the bottom. That way, I don't have any hard edges. See how much brighter that got? Beautiful. Still have some of that dark area showing through, which gives it some depth, and it's still darker at the bottom, which it needs to be. There we go. Be careful not to drag it into your wet green though, otherwise it'll change colors. But anyways, I think we'll just add a little bit more titanium white to the top. Make sure that once you drag it down, the top still is the brightest portion. But I think that right there is essentially our 10-minute version of the painting. I'm probably going over it by just a couple of seconds, but I didn't think you'd mind to see the extra little tip. With that said though, that right there is today's 10-minute painting. So there we have it. That is our 10-minute version of this painting. As per usual, I do want to spend a little more time with it, so I'm going to add 20 minutes to the clock, see what I can do in under half an hour. I'll include a sped up version of that right here, and I'll include the real-time version with the descriptions over on Patreon along with the traceable. Hopefully this added segment gives you some extra inspiration, keeps you excited, gives you some extra ideas. So I hope you enjoy and have fun watching this little piece as well. So anyways, there we have it. That is our 10-minute version. That is our half an hour version. I really hope you enjoyed and you feel inspired to go out and create your own marvelous piece. As per usual, if you'd like any help, I am here and happy to help. Just leave a comment in the comment section down below. And if you'd like to share your work with me, you can do so over on the private Facebook group, which we offer over on Patreon. Again, up there you can get the traceable, the extended version, over 50 hour-long lessons, access to polls, plenty of really fun, great resources, all of which will be linked in the description. I will see you next Saturday with a brand new 10-minute painting. So until then, this was a pleasure. I hope you enjoyed. Go create something great, or maybe watch another 10-minute painting lesson. Regardless, I will see you soon. Thank you for stopping by, and above all, as always, stay creative.
sweet nippers. Breakfast time. Mommy, Daddy, are you awake yet? Hello? I need sustenance for my glorious vessel. Mommy! Mommy!